You became the president of Dartmouth, I think, in 2009. You're there for a couple years, and you're trained as a medical doctor and as a social anthropologist. You have no finance background. All of a sudden, somebody says, would you like to be the president of the World Bank? What would make you think that would be a job you would be qualified for, and why would you want to leave the academic setting that you've spent much of your life in?
Well, it's a question that a lot of people in the financial world asked as well when I was nominated. But we had always known in all of my years working in development that the World Bank was the most important institution for people who wanted to help poor countries develop. And so I came to the interview with President Obama, and he was asking me exactly the same question. He literally said to me, why should I nominate you and not a macroeconomist? And so this is when I made the pitch, probably the most important pitch I've made in my life. I said, well, the first question I asked him was, have you read your mother's PhD dissertation? And he looked at me and he said, well, yeah, I have. And I said, well, I'm an anthropologist like her. And so I said to him, I haven't been in the finance world, but I've been on the ground doing development work for most of my adult life. I'll be able to tell you how it's working on the ground. And he just looked at me and he said, okay, I get that.
So was he surprised you actually read his mother's PhD thesis?
He was. And he later, we were together in a more informal setting, and he said, Jim, that was one of the best ploys to get a job I've ever seen.
All right. So did you feel intimidated for this job when you didn't have those kind of backgrounds, or not?
Well, I certainly felt humbled about it. And we have people here in the audience, many of whom taught me a lot about how the World Bank works. And so I felt like, well, learning finance and learning macroeconomics is going to be a huge challenge for me. But for the previous presidents coming in, learning development must have been an even bigger challenge for them. And so I felt like I knew about what development was like, what working in developing countries was like. And then I really worked hard to learn the other things that I needed to learn when I got here.
When you show up at a meeting or something and you tell people you're the president of the World Bank, do their eyes kind of open wider or their jaws drop? It's a pretty good title.
But it depends on where you are, right? So when in Washington, if you do that, they'll say, well, do you guys have a branch in Alexandria?
Right.
And do you have ATMs? I mean, so some places you're extremely well known, right? And other places you're not known at all.
But when you're, let's say, playing golf and you're a very good golfer, you're like 5 handicap, as I understand it, very good golfer. I'll ask you about that later. Do people give you putts more than they used to when you're president of the World Bank, or that doesn't happen?
Not at all, not at all. They have the mistaken impression that I have access to cash myself, and so they're trying to get that from me.